The Young and the Restless Spoilers, the shattering world of Lauren Fenmore Baldwin, Michael's betrayal and Diane's terrible truth. The air in Genoa City was thick with tension, a heavy fog of fear and uncertainty hanging over every corner of the town. The once perfectly poised Lauren Fenmore Baldwin found herself standing on the precipice of a life she no longer recognized. In the luxurious setting of the Genoa City Athletic Club, GCAC, a place known for its exclusivity and power, Lauren faced the most gut-wrenching challenge of her life, confronting her husband, Michael Baldwin, about his dangerous secret betrayal. It was a betrayal that not only threatened their marriage but also ignited the wrath of the most formidable man in Genoa City, Victor Newman. The frantic confrontation. Lauren's fearful realization. Lauren's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at Michael, her mind struggling to comprehend the horrific reality unfolding before her. The weight of his confession seemed to hang in the air, suffocating her with every word. She had always known Michael as a man of integrity, someone who stood by her and their family with unwavering loyalty. But now, that very man was standing before her, his face stricken with guilt and fear as he admitted to a betrayal that could cost him, and possibly both of them, everything. "Do you realize how dangerous this is?" Lauren's voice trembled, her eyes wide with shock. Her mind raced with the horrifying implications of what Michael had done, and the dread was so overwhelming she felt as though she couldn't breathe. She glanced nervously around the room, her eyes darting to every corner, half expecting a pair of Victor's cold, calculating eyes to appear from the shadows. Victor's reach was vast and ruthless, and Lauren knew from personal experience just how far he would go to protect his interests. Michael's confession, that he had secretly warned Jack Abbott about Victor's machinations, sent a chill down Lauren's spine. She could see it now, the very real danger Michael had unwittingly placed them both in. And worse yet, it wasn't just any betrayal, it was a betrayal of the highest order. Victor Newman, the titan of business and the undisputed king of Genoa City, didn't take kindly to anyone crossing him. And Michael had done just that. The memories of Victor's previous actions flooded Lauren's mind in a terrifying rush. She remembered all too well the way Victor had orchestrated Adam Newman's exile from the Newman family, using his influence and power to control and manipulate those closest to him. And who could forget the destruction he had caused in Billy Abbott's life? Victor had single-handedly ruined Billy's career, his family relationships, and his peace of mind, all in the name of maintaining control. Now, Michael was in his crosshairs. And the thought of what Victor could do to them, to Michael, made Lauren's blood run cold. The terrible price of betrayal, Diane's dark revelation. As if the weight of Michael's confession wasn't enough to bear, Lauren's world was about to be further shattered by another cruel twist of fate. Diane Jenkins, a woman whose own history was intertwined with the Newmans in the most scandalous and dangerous ways, brought forth a truth that would haunt Lauren for the rest of her life. Diane's arrival in Genoa City had already set off a chain of events, but it was her latest revelation that would bring the greatest disaster. The woman who had once been married to Victor Newman and had tasted the bitter fruits of his wrath now had something even more dangerous to reveal, something that could seal Michael's fate once and for all. With a sinister smile, Diane leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper as she recounted the terrible truth. "Victor knows what Michael did. And he's already made his decision." Diane's words were cold, calculated, and they struck Lauren like a thunderclap. At that moment, Lauren realized the extent of the nightmare they were trapped in. Diane's warning was clear: Victor was not just angry, he was ready to make an example of Michael. And the consequences of crossing Victor were catastrophic. Lauren's stomach churned as the full weight of the situation hit her. Michael had not just betrayed his own moral code, but he had also placed himself in direct opposition to Victor, a man who played the game of power and destruction better than anyone. The fallout, a marriage on the brink. As the days passed, Lauren's fear and anxiety grew more intense. She could no longer sleep, constantly replaying the confrontation in her mind. The images of Victor's past retaliations haunted her every waking moment. Would Michael survive the wrath of the Newman patriarch? Would they both be torn apart by Victor's relentless pursuit of retribution? The very fabric of their lives, their marriage, their careers, and their safety was now hanging by a thread. For Michael, the weight of his actions was even more suffocating. He had never imagined that his small act of defiance, warning Jack Abbott about Victor's plan, would lead to this catastrophic chain of events. But now that it had, he could no longer ignore the consequences. He had crossed a line that Victor would never forgive. And worse, he had put Lauren in the line of fire. But Michael was no stranger to danger. He had navigated the treacherous waters of Genoa City's political and corporate landscape before. He had fought battles, won wars, and lived to tell the tale. But this time, he wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the woman he loved. And he would stop at nothing to protect her. The countdown to destruction. Victor's revenge. Victor Newman's wrath was legendary. Those who crossed him, no matter how powerful or untouchable they seemed, were never safe. And now, Michael Baldwin had made the most perilous mistake of all. He had chosen to stand against Victor, even if it was in the name of righteousness. Victor's first move was swift and ruthless. He summoned Michael to a cold, sterile meeting at Newman Enterprises, where no pleasantries were exchanged. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Victor's glare was enough to freeze anyone in their tracks. Michael had been summoned not for a discussion, but for a declaration. Victor would have his retribution. Victor's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the underlying menace in his words. "You've made a very grave mistake, Michael," he said, his words a mere whisper that still carried the weight of 1,000 threats. "And now, you will pay the price." The feeling in the room was suffocating. Michael had faced many of Victor's threats before, but this time felt different. There was no negotiation, no deal to be made. Michael had overstepped, and now, Victor would ensure that there would be no escape. The final showdown: who will survive Victor's fury? The days that followed were filled with mounting tension, as Michael and Lauren prepared for the inevitable storm that was about to hit. The fallout from Michael's betrayal would shake Genoa City to its core, and the repercussions of Victor's vengeance would be felt by everyone, from the powerful Newmans to the unsuspecting residents of the city. In the end, Lauren's greatest fear became a reality. The powerful and unforgiving Victor Newman would stop at nothing to ensure that Michael paid for his treachery. The question now was not if Michael would be destroyed, but how. Victor Newman had made his decision, and in the world of the Newmans, there was no escaping the consequences of betrayal. Michael Baldwin's world was about to be irrevocably shattered, and Lauren was left to pick up the pieces, or watch as everything they had built crumbled before her eyes. In Genoa City, power was everything, and those who dared to challenge the Newman dynasty rarely lived to tell the tale. Michael Baldwin, it seemed, was no exception. The words Michael Baldwin had spoken with such determination echoed in the air, but they felt hollow, like a desperate attempt to cling to a reality that no longer existed. "I'm trying to prevent a war, not start one," Michael insisted, his voice firm but lacking the conviction he so desperately wanted to believe in. Yet, as soon as those words left his lips, Lauren Fenmore Baldwin's response shattered his illusion of control. She cut through his idealism like a knife, her voice unwavering, her eyes dark with the weight of truth. "With Victor, there is no such thing as half-betrayal," Lauren declared, her tone sharp, her words like a painful slap. "You're either with him or against him." Lauren's words hung in the air like a death sentence, and the look in her eyes made Michael realize that he had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. There was no more room for negotiation, no gray area. With Victor Newman, there was only black or white, and Michael had chosen to stand in opposition. Tracy Bregman's portrayal of Lauren's anguish was raw and heartbreakingly real. Her plea for Michael to understand the magnitude of his actions was filled with an emotional depth that left no room for doubt. She had spent so many years alongside Michael, weathering storms and overcoming obstacles together, but now, she feared that the very storm they had once weathered could be the one to tear them apart, for good. It wasn't just the betrayal of a family member or a business partner, it was the betrayal of a man who held the power to destroy their entire world, Victor Newman. As Lauren tried desperately to make Michael understand, the reality of their situation set in. They had both fought so hard to build their lives, but now, with Victor's wrath looming over them, the very foundation of their future seemed poised to crumble. Diane's brutal truth, a family on the brink just when Lauren's fear couldn't feel more suffocating, another figure from the past arrived to deliver a blow that would change everything. Diane Jenkins Abbott, the woman whose own relationship with Victor had been as tumultuous as it was dangerous, stood before them. She knew all too well the destruction Victor could bring, having lived through the ruthless consequences of crossing him. Diane had been a part of his world, and now, she was a messenger of the terrible truth that awaited Michael. Diane had no time for pleasantries, and her keen sense of the tension between Lauren and Michael was impossible to miss. She wasted no time, diving straight into the heart of the matter with her characteristic bluntness. Having seen firsthand the carnage Victor had caused in her own life, Diane wasn't one to sugarcoat things. "Are you still taking orders from a man who treats people like disposable pawns?" Diane challenged, her words pointed, her disdain for Victor obvious. It was clear she wasn't just referring to Michael's current situation, but to the ongoing manipulation that Victor was notorious for, even using innocent people like Audra Charles to further his agenda. Diane's words cut through the room like a blade, and for a moment, Michael could feel the weight of her judgment pressing down on him. The reference to Audra Charles and the destruction of Kyle Abbott's relationship with Claire Newman wasn't lost on Michael. It was another painful reminder of just how far Victor would go to manipulate and control the lives of those around him. He could break families, destroy relationships, and ruin careers with just the snap of his fingers. And now, Michael had made himself a target in that dangerous game. Diane's presence was both a warning and a wake-up call. She had survived the wrath of Victor before, but her life had been forever changed by the experience. Michael, on the other hand, was only beginning to realize the depth of the consequences he had unleashed by crossing the man who ruled Genoa City with an iron fist. There was no mercy when it came to Victor Newman, and Michael was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The weight of choices, a family at the crossroads. As Lauren absorbed the painful truth from both Michael and Diane, she felt her world falling apart around her. She had always known the stakes were high when it came to Victor, but now, as the full extent of the danger they faced became clear, she realized that nothing would ever be the same. Michael had always believed he could navigate the treacherous waters of Victor's world, but Lauren knew, as much as it pained her to admit it, that no one could ever truly win against Victor Newman. Every decision Michael had made up until this point had led them here. His loyalty to Victor, his attempts to distance himself from the ruthless power struggles, and his misguided belief that he could shield their family from the fallout, all of it had been in vain. Now, the moment of reckoning had arrived, and no amount of clever reasoning or defiance would protect them from what was to come. Lauren's heart ached as she thought about their children, their future. The dream of a peaceful life, free from the constant fear and manipulation that Victor thrived on, was slipping further and further away. Would Michael survive the storm he had unleashed? Would their family be torn apart by the very man Michael had once thought he could control? Victor's wrath, the final consequence. It wasn't just the threat of personal devastation that hung over Michael's head. Victor's reach was far and wide, and his ability to destroy anyone who dared defy him was unparalleled. Michael had crossed a line, and in the world of the Newmans, lines like that were not easily erased. Victor's wrath was swift and brutal, as Lauren had always feared. The days that followed were filled with tension, as Michael and Lauren found themselves at the mercy of a man who could not, and would not, forgive betrayal. The pieces were set into motion, and with each passing hour, the inevitability of the storm that was coming grew stronger. Lauren held her breath, waiting for the final blow, but knowing, deep down, that no matter what happened next, their lives would never be the same again. She had hoped that Michael's actions would not lead to this, but now, with Diane's warnings and Victor's looming presence, Lauren had to face the harsh truth: their fight was no longer just against Victor's empire. It was a fight for their very survival. In the world of Genoa City, where power was everything and betrayal was often the price of survival, Lauren and Michael Baldwin were about to learn the true cost of crossing Victor Newman. And whether they would emerge from this ordeal unscathed, or torn apart, remained to be seen. The battle for their future had only just begun. The tension in the room was palpable, as if the very air was charged with the consequences of Michael Baldwin's actions. He had already confessed to betraying Victor Newman, a man whose wrath was legendary, but it wasn't until Diane Jenkins Abbott entered the scene that the gravity of his mistake truly began to sink in. Diane, a woman who had once been entangled in Victor's manipulative web, knew better than anyone what the stakes were. She had survived the wrath of the Newman patriarch, but now she was forced to witness Michael's dangerous miscalculation, one that could shatter everything he held dear. Diane's eyes scanned the room with cold calculation. She could feel the undercurrent of tension between Michael and Lauren, the quiet desperation that hung between them like a ticking time bomb. Diane wasn't one to waste time on pleasantries, especially when the stakes were so high. Her gaze fixed on Michael with a mixture of contempt and pity, her voice sharp and unforgiving. "Are you still taking orders from a man who treats people like disposable pawns?" Diane's words cut through the silence, a pointed accusation that pierced Michael's already fragile resolve. She wasn't just addressing Michael's betrayal, she was calling into question his loyalty to Victor, a loyalty that had now become his undoing. The reference to Audra Charles was deliberate, a reminder of Victor's ruthless tactics. Diane's words were like a punch to the gut, forcing Michael to confront the reality of what he had gotten himself into. Victor had used Audra to destroy Kyle Abbott's relationship with Claire Newman, using her as a pawn in his twisted game of control. And now, Michael had unwittingly put himself in the same position, a pawn in Victor's grand scheme. But Diane didn't stop there. With a cruel precision that only she could muster, she twisted the knife deeper into Michael's heart. "This is really about protecting the Abbott family, or are you just clinging to the delusion that Victor actually values you?" Diane's words were a cold, biting question that left no room for doubt. She wasn't just challenging Michael's actions, she was challenging his very sense of self-worth, questioning whether he was truly a man of integrity or simply a puppet in Victor's game. Susan Walters, in her portrayal of Diane, perfectly captured the brutal reality of this moment. With a mixture of disdain and almost a begrudging concern, Diane laid bare Michael's weaknesses in a way that was both devastating and insightful. Diane had always been a master of reading people, of understanding the vulnerabilities of those around her, and now she used that skill to expose Michael's deepest fears. She knew exactly where to strike, and she did so with ruthless efficiency. Lauren, who had been silently absorbing the weight of the conversation, finally spoke up, revealing the full extent of Michael's betrayal. She disclosed that Michael had warned Jack Abbott about Victor's schemes, a move that had now put them all in jeopardy. As she spoke, Diane's expression hardened, and her eyes narrowed, as if she had just uncovered the most damning truth. "You've given Victor everything he needs to destroy you," Diane declared, her voice unwavering. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, the final judgment on Michael's decision to defy Victor. It wasn't just a warning, it was a proclamation of doom. Diane had seen firsthand what Victor was capable of, and now, she was bearing witness to the impending fallout from Michael's betrayal. The weight of Diane's words was crushing. Michael had thought that by standing up to Victor, by warning Jack Abbott, he was doing the right thing. But in the world of Victor Newman, there was no room for moral victories. There was only survival, and Michael had just made the worst mistake of his life. The Reckoning, a family on the brink of destruction in the aftermath of Diane's brutal revelations, the room seemed to close in around Michael. Lauren stood beside him, her face pale with fear and disbelief, as she realized the full extent of what they were up against. Diane had laid it all bare. Michael had not only betrayed Victor, but he had also given him the ammunition needed to destroy everything he had worked for. Michael had been blinded by his own idealism, believing that he could outsmart Victor, that he could play the game without losing everything. But as Diane had so mercilessly pointed out, Victor's power was absolute. There was no escaping the consequences of crossing him. And now, Michael was about to learn that lesson in the hardest way possible. Diane, the woman who had once been Victor's lover, his wife, and his victim, knew better than anyone the danger that Michael now faced. She had survived Victor's wrath before, but she had also been left broken in its wake. Her words were not just a warning, they were a reflection of her own painful history with the Newman family. She knew what Victor was capable of, and she knew that Michael had just sealed his own fate.